Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Myung-Soo Lee. I'm the director of the Weissman Center for International Business and the professor of marketing and international business department at the Zicklin School of Business. I welcome all of you to the Mitsui USA Lunch-Time Forum, the first event in this semester. And I just want to thank you because you're taking your busy time out, your classes, all those extracurricular activities on campus. And also coming out of the 2 weeks in a row, we were off on Monday. So maybe you have a little difficult time to readjust yourself. The Tuesday is a Monday, right? Just, came back from the President's Day long weekend. This is 167th. So let me repeat that, 167, 167th such an event. And we truly appreciate the generous support, the financial support of the Mitsui USA Foundation, who actually feeds you your sandwiches and your soda. Actually, comes from their generous financial support. And so we have been doing this for the past 25 years. You can imagine, okay, this is, one of those lunchtime events at Baruch College, okay, feeding lunch, we hear great speakers like today. So I just want to acknowledge this is a long, now the tradition of the Baruch College, the lunchtime event. While we learn a lot about the different topics through the lunchtime forum, one of the unique features of this forum is to showcase to you, the audience, how those successful business people and top executives actually communicate effectively with the audience, okay? In this case, is mostly students. So, we, at the same time, tend to learn a lot about the special topical areas that the speaker will bring in. Today, it happens to be the cryptocurrency, okay? The crypto industry knowledge that we'll glean a little bit. And also, it is even more exciting, okay, if we can ever imagine, when we could invite our own alums to the Lunchtime Forum event and to hear their success stories and also their expert knowledge on particular area. Today is exactly that will happen. Okay? As we announced, our speaker, Viktor Bunin, who leads the protocol specialist team at Coinbase Cloud, the largest staking infrastructure provider. Later, the Victor will explain to us. So above my head, I don't know exactly what he's talking about, but he will help us to understand. He's the industry's first protocol specialist. Have you heard about that term? So he'll explain to us, okay, what that is. And the role he created as an all-employee of the Bison Trails, later acquired by the Coinbase, that has now become an industry staple and organizations like A16Z and Blockdaemon. And Victor is also the co-founder of the Credibly Neutral, a venture funding, investing in protocols, infrastructure, and the crypto SaaS. And he graduated, again, proudly from Baruch College with the double majors in Economics and Psychology from the Weissman School of the Arts and Sciences, okay? So he lives in Brooklyn with his wife, Lisa, son Sasha, and the dog, Korra, and that's part of his bio. By the way, we will give you an opportunity for you to ask questions to Victor, and particularly our students in the audience strongly encourage you to ask very interesting questions to Victor, okay? And also, the Victor agreed that after his talk, he'll be around 15, 20 minutes of time to meet with you all as part of the brief networking session. So I strongly encourage you to hang around and then introduce yourself to Victor and get connected as a network opportunity. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Viktor Bunin to our podium. He's our proud alum, okay? So Victor, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. So I am going to give the kind of talk that I wish that I had heard when I was sitting in your seats. It's going to be a two-parter. The first part is I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about my life and how I got to where I am today. And the second part is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about crypto and why crypto is a thing and why it will continue to be a thing and why I believe that it's the future. But one thing that I want everybody to take away, and I'm going to say this at the beginning, I'm going to say this at the end, that if there's any one thing that I want you to take away from my presence here and your time spent here, other than delicious lunch, is, when I was in school, when I was in your seats, I was thinking about like who I wanted to be and what kind of job I wanted to have. And it felt like I was, gazing up at this big tree of possibilities and like trying to select the leaf that I wanted to end up on out of the tens of thousands of leaves that were out there. And that always felt to me like an impossibility. I didn't know what my passion was. I wasn't like super hype about anything. So I really struggled, and I felt a lot of imposter syndrome because some buddies of mine like knew they wanted to be in finance and like that's all they wanted to do with their life. And I was like, well, I don't know that that's what I want. And so I just always found it very frightening. And so I took a little bit of a different path that I'll tell you about today, which is just pursuing whatever is the most interesting to me at that moment. Like trying to select just a big branch on that tree rather than trying to select a leaf. And continuing to do that over and over again until I finally ended up on a leaf and I'm like, wow, this is actually a great leaf for me. With that, let's get started. So as I'm sure many of you here, I was a finance major. Not because I cared about finance at all, but all the smart people were doing it. And I was like, all right, they make a lot of money and they're all very smart. Let me go do that as well. And so I got into the financial leadership program, which at the time, and I'm told still now, is like the top program at Baruch, which is quite nice. Funnels people straight into finance. And I ended up meeting a lot of the bankers and other folks that they would bring in. And I was like, man, I don't want to be like these people. Like they're very smart and very successful, but they're very, very boring and they weren't that inspiring to me. And so halfway through my junior year, I ended up switching to a double major in economics and psychology. I was originally just going to do economics, but then they told me that it's in both schools, which I still didn't understand why that is. But apparently if I did it in Weissman, I could double major. And so I was like, that sounds like it'll increase my odds at being a person. So that's quite nice. And at that point, I didn't know what to do with myself. And I was like, all right, if I'm not doing finance anymore, what's the next most interesting thing to me that is also like very challenging and cool and has a lot of great characteristics? So I decided in consulting. And at the time, nobody from Baruch went into consulting. But I was like, that's the one for me, and I'm going to go do that. And so I ended up, applying and kind of like working at it, and I ended up getting this kind of like lucky break. I was working at a puzzle shop in the holiday markets. If you've seen them in Union Square or like Bryant Park, there were wooden puzzles. And so I was selling those. And I would talk to the smart people that came there and just ask them about what they did. And one of the ladies that came, she says, oh, I'm a consultant. And I was like, really? That's what I want to do. And so I ended up exchanging information with her, sent her my resume. She helped me edit it and submitted it. And so like halfway through my senior year, when I thought I was definitely going to leave school without a job, I ended up securing a job, which I was very, very happy for. And why did I pick consulting? Well, a lot of smart people, very hard to get into, lots of travel, lots of different and interesting opportunities. And so somebody that didn't know what they were passionate about, I was like, hey, I can go and try out all these different things, right, and find out what's really interesting to me. So I was doing consulting. And I started off doing like risk and operations, which is kind of standard for a lot of kids in Baruch. And I was like, wow, this is like really boring. What other opportunities are there within EY where I was working that are more interesting? And at the time, they were starting up the digital strategy team. And I was like, oh man, like everybody wants to be in this thing. They're doing the coolest work. That sounds like the most interesting thing that is in front of me right now. Let me go do that. And so I ended up working there. And then as time kind of went on, I realized I was like, man, I was working with a lot of financial institutions, and I was like, man, I really don't care about the things that I'm building here. And in 2017, a buddy, I was watching crypto, as were many other people, and I kept wanting to learn about it and just never found the time. And so I asked a buddy of mine, I said, hey, help me put some money into Bitcoin. And so he opened up an account with me, and I put $3,000, which is all the money that I had to my name at the time. I just put all of it into Bitcoin. And I was like, all right, now I have the motivation to read about it. And so started learning about Bitcoin and crypto, and pretty quickly it became just all-consuming for me. Like it just hit, and it's like the only thing that I could read about, the only thing I could talk about, the only thing I could think about, and it's just like it was so interesting to me. It's so fascinating. And in 2018, I left EY and I started doing some of my own consulting within crypto, and I kind of felt like a fraud. I was just like, man, I've only been around for like a little bit. Who am I to tell these people what they should be doing? And I realized that it came really naturally to me. And there was a specific part of crypto which was all around like incentive designs and tokens and like behaviors and like how do you design these systems so that all the actors that are participating in them like do the things that they want to do that are selfish for them to do, but in doing that, they actually advance the system and make the system resilient and robust. And it came so naturally to me because I kind of looked back and I was like, wait a minute, I was doing, economics and psychology, this double major, and I was always like very curious about behavioral economics and like how to get myself to do the things that I thought were good for me, or how to like incentivize other people to do the things that were good for them. And then going to consulting, where it's like a lot of this, design and like working with folks and all that stuff. And so by the time I got into crypto, in this like very specific role of like token design and incentive design, I was just like, wait a minute, I've been training for this role for the last 10 years before this job even existed. And now all of a sudden it came into being, and it just so happened that I found it through my interest, and it became like the perfect thing for me. And I thought that was really quite interesting because, if you were to ask me sitting in Baruch like what I was going to be doing, token design was not going to be an answer that I or anybody else would have had for me. But it was really quite magical the way that all played out, and I thought that was really, really special. And so, as I was working through crypto, I worked at a couple of startups. I organized a large hackathon, and then I interviewed for this company called Bison Trails. And it's a very young startup. It only had 6 employees at the time that I interviewed there. And when I interviewed, the job description that they had was operations manager. And it said, if you like crypto and you want crypto to be successful, come work here. And at the time, this was like the depth of the bear market, and so there were no jobs, no money, like everybody was poor and sad. And so I interviewed with them, not knowing anything about what an operations manager would do, but also thinking that that's probably not going to be a good role for me because I'm not really an operations type person. And in my second interview with them, the night before, I wrote out in my journal what I thought my job description should be, like what I thought I should be doing. And when I came to talk to them, there was no job description. And so they were like, hey, there's a couple of things we think you should be working on based on your skill set. And so they listed 4, and I said like, hey, I made a list too. Mine's written down. So you tell me what you think, and I'll tell you where we align. And so they listed 4 things. I'm like, yep, got all those 4. Here's the 5th thing. They said, yep, you should do that too. I said, great, that's my job description. And so that's so they hired me. And then they're like, well, on your hiring paperwork, we need to put a title. It's not operations manager. Clearly, like, what should it be? And so that's how we invented the protocol specialist role. And essentially, in inventing that role, it's a role that is very specific to the crypto ecosystem. In the same way that product managers didn't exist before the internet and like all these tech companies took off, because there was no point, like why would you have a product manager? It's a role that doesn't make sense unless you're like building in an internet and tech-enabled way, and you need to coordinate all these engineers. And so protocol specialist is like the equivalent of a product manager, but for crypto, where the point of it is that as you're working with all these crypto ecosystems, you need to know what's going on there, right? And you need to know what are the recent advancements, like what are the technologies, like what does it all mean for us? Which ones should we be working on? And so it's a very strategic and future-oriented role where your whole job is to understand everything that is coming in and do that research, and then operationalize those insights to drive product strategy, roadmap, features, content, pricing, legal, marketing, et cetera. And so it's a role that mixes kind of like all the most cutting-edge stuff while at the same time like being really results-oriented and actually driving to like really cool outcomes, such as like building stuff and launching products and so on. And so it's a role that is custom and perfectly made for me, which is great because I made it. And since then, it's become an industry staple at other organizations. And so like Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of the top venture investors of all time, it's a big VC fund. Like they have protocol specialists. Most of our competitors have protocol specialists. Within Coinbase, oh, by the way, Bison Trails got acquired by Coinbase. I've been at Coinbase for the last 3 years now. But within Coinbase, we actually made protocol specialists into a career track. And so never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that I was going to be inventing job titles coming out of Baruch. And so that's been quite fascinating. And that's really why that was one of the key takeaways I wanted people here to have, which is that you don't have to go down a really specific path that is like really well defined of like, okay, I'm going to be in IB for 2 years, and then I'm going to be in PE, and then I'm going to go start my own PE shop, and then right? And you have like super well-defined delineated steps. You can take a non-traditional paths, which is at all times just continuing to follow your interests wherever that may lead you. And obviously at the same time, working hard, being adventurous, taking risks, having a good time. And so now where I am is because I've done this protocol specialist stuff really well, I'm like one of the foremost experts in the crypto ecosystem around protocols. And so because of that, I started investing. And so my wife and I angel invested, which means that you invest into smaller startups in the very early stages. So we did a number of those deals, and then people really enjoyed working with us, and they're like, hey, why don't you start a venture fund? And so my wife and I started a venture fund together called Credibly Neutral. And essentially what that means is that we raise money from outside investors. And so like, somebody that has some money from some work that they did or whatever it is, they give us the money and then we invest it into startups. And then if the startups do well, then they make a bunch of money and then we make a bunch of money and then everybody's quite happy. And so, it's gotten to the point where, I've been working in crypto now for the last 7 years. I've seen a lot of the kind of like ups and downs, and we've seen like bear markets that were really, really sad. When the price of ETH fell 95% in 2018, that was quite a sad time to be in crypto. But crypto is a technology whose time has come. And so it's been a real pleasure to work in the crypto ecosystem for the last 7 years and to chart my own path through it, and then have that path lead to quite a bit of success from that perspective. So yeah, so that's about me. That's my story. Next I want to talk to you guys about crypto and like why any of this stuff even matters. And so the best way to think about crypto or like blockchain or Bitcoin or like any of this stuff, it's all just a big computer. That's what it is. It's a computer that can run code. And so when you think about like Ethereum, for example, there's tokens on it. You can send them around. You can send money. But the interesting part is that you can also create applications. And so those applications can be all kinds of stuff. One of the things you can do is you can build a fully digital bank, right? That just runs entirely through code, has all the rules stipulated through it. You can, you can do stuff like verification. And so, for example, let's say right now there's a lot of like these deep fakes with AI, right? One of the things you can do is you can actually timestamp to a blockchain, such as Ethereum or Bitcoin or any other one, saying like, hey, this is the provenance of this piece of data that I produced. Like here's a picture, like here's when I took this picture. You know that it was taken from this camera and that it's a real life picture of me, right? And so all of a sudden, like now that deepfakes and all these other things are getting going, we're starting to have tooling that is going to be able to combat that. Not 100%, but do a really good job of it. And so when you think about crypto, there's like three big kind of like takeaways. And when I say it's technology whose time has come, there's really three big takeaways there. So the first takeaway is, and this is a little bit of a pop quiz, so you can just call out. Does anybody know when the wire transfer was invented? The first wire transfer was sent. Does anybody know? Or you would take a guess, just call out. 1970, no, wrong, earlier. Not 55, earlier. Nope, earlier. 1800s, we're getting close. 1872. 1872 is when the wire transfer was invented. Does anybody want to guess when ACH was invented? No, 1972. SWIFT, which is how you do transfers internationally, that was invented in 1973. And so those are like some, and Visa was 1958, if anybody's curious. But when you think about like our financial infrastructure, our financial system, like the most cutting edge technology that we have is 50 years old, right? And some of the other stuff is 150 years old. And so when you look at that and you're just like, hey, is there a chance that maybe this could use a little bit of a facelift and a little bit of an upgrade? And that's one of the things that crypto enables. It enables you not only to move assets as you want, you have dollars on blockchains, for example, and do whatever you want with them, but you can also have entire financial institutions that are based in code and can do things like enable you to lend and borrow, for example, or enable you to do commerce or accept payments or whatever it is. And so that's one of the nice things about crypto as a way to upgrade the entire existing financial system. So the second takeaway about why crypto matters, or why it's here to stay at all, is when we think about ownership, right? Ownership and the ability to own things is so deeply imbued in our lives that we almost take it for granted, right? Like, I have the same name here, Victor, right? That I do at my job, that I do at my store or my coffee shop or whatever it is. My house, I own it. I can do what I want with it. If I buy a t-shirt, right, I can rip it apart, or I can decorate it, or I can do whatever you want. Like, it's obvious, right? But when we look at the existing internet, there is no concept of ownership, like overwhelmingly. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean there. So when you think about it, like, there's really three types of networks, right? There's protocol networks, there's corporate networks, and then there's crypto networks. When you think about protocol networks, what I mean is, for example, TCP/IP, right, or SMTP. These are protocols that are at the foundation of the internet that define really simple things, for example, how computers talk to each other, right, or how you send email. And those things are massively adopted. Obviously, our entire internet runs on them. They have no take rate. You don't pay anything for using them. We've all just agreed that this is a good standard. We're all going to use it. And so when you look at those things, like, that's what websites run on, for example. And websites have seen an enormous amount of innovation, right? And like people can have their own websites, they can have their own domain names, and like websites continues to be a thing where people can create businesses and lives and show art and do all that stuff. But once you get past protocol networks and you get into corporate networks, which is what you have today with like Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, all of them, right? What you have is you have essentially these walled gardens, right? And we spend almost the entirety of our digital lives within these walled gardens. They're almost like theme parks where you have a totally curated experience. And one of the things that does is when you think about a network, right, there's the center of the network and then there's the outside, like the edges of the network. And you think about, okay, where is the money and where is the innovation, right? And when you have the protocol networks that we talked above, right, the innovation and the money is all at the edges. It's the people that are actually building websites and creating businesses and doing all this stuff. When you think about the corporate networks that we have today, right, even Visa and other financial networks, right, an enormous amount of profit and innovation is actually at the center. Like if you're on Facebook or on most of these other networks, you're not the one that is getting anything from it. But if you actually look at how much money all these folks are making, they're making an enormous amount of money. There was a point in time about 10, 15 years ago when Facebook and Twitter and all these other guys, they had open APIs, meaning that you can come and you can build things on top of them. You can have games, you can have like different clients for how you interact with Twitter. And everybody was really excited because they were like, hey, like these networks are like really powerful, they're super great, and other people are able to then like remix and build stuff on top and like create businesses around interacting with these networks. And then what happened is that all of these corporate networks follow the attract then extract lifecycle, which is they're attracting all the users and all the developers and all the business and all the whatever, and they're like, just kidding, our APIs are actually going to be turned off now. And so now it's all about extracting revenue through advertisements and all kinds of different things. And so, and now look, there's no businesses building on top of Facebook, right? There's no businesses building on top of Twitter. There's no businesses building on top of like most of these things, right? And so what crypto networks fundamentally do is combine the best of both worlds, of both protocol networks and corporate networks. So on the protocol networks, even though they're like really great, they have no take rates, but one of the problems with them is that they also can't fund themselves. They don't have any money. Most of these things are run on donations, and so they're quite poor, and it's all volunteers, and people have tried to create the equivalent of protocol networks that do social graphs, and they got zero traction. And why is that? Because Facebook has $1 trillion, and they can spend all of it and like outcompete you very, very easily. And so when you think about crypto networks, one of the things that they do is they push innovation and profits to the edges. The network itself has a very, very low take rate by default, and it cannot really increase it. But it has enough of a take rate that it can actually fund its own development. And so people are creating features and like advancing it and pushing it forward. And so crypto networks try to be the best of both worlds and reintroduce the concept of ownership into the internet. And so you can own your own name essentially on crypto networks. And so for example, I have a ENS, it's called Ethereum Name Service. It's victor.eth. And so if you're sending money, and you can send it to victor.eth, I will get that. I own that domain space. When it comes to art, right, like NFTs, I can own the NFTs that I'm owning. When it comes to putting code on the blockchain, for example, right, I can own that. Or if somebody puts a song on there, I can own that. And now all of a sudden you get to this place where, wait a minute, now you're able to have ownership in these digital contexts. And if there's anything that we've seen, ownership is a prerequisite for human flourishing and innovation. Like if you're just essentially going to theme parks all the time, you're not building businesses, you're not creating a life for yourself. Like you're there for amusement and enjoyment, but really like there's somebody else that makes all the profit and you're just paying for it in some way or another. But when you reintroduce the concept of ownership, that's when you reintroduce the ability for humans to profit and innovate and build businesses and build lives. And so that's what crypto tries to do. And the third thing that's really nice about crypto is that when you have tokens like Bitcoin and Ethereum, for example, and some others, they try to be really great money. And something that I always like to ask people is, by the way, I'm like an American maximalist. I love the United States. Came here from Russia. It's great. But when we look at the dollar and we look at the constant inflation, not just for the dollar, but for almost every currency out there, it's very hard to see a world where America pays off its debt and cuts its deficit and gets back in a sustainable budget path. And so everybody knows that inflation will keep going. They're not even trying to hit the 2% benchmark anymore. And so some folks rightly ask, well, what if there are different and better forms of money that are out there that we can really put our weight behind? And so that's what drives a lot of the stuff behind Bitcoin and Ethereum, where people say like, hey, you know what the rate of inflation is going to be on Bitcoin for the next 120 years, right? And that rate it would be unbelievably difficult to change. And if you try to change it, everybody would know that it is in the process of being changed, so they can make decisions about it. And so in a world where inflation is rampant, it becomes very attractive to have assets that are uncorrelated to these trends and that are able to chart their own path, and a path that is widely known and publicly known. So those are the 3 bits about why crypto is here to stay and why it matters. I think the financial system, upgrading that is incredibly important. Changing the concept of ownership on the internet is incredibly important. And then creating a better money is incredibly important. And so that's why I've been working in crypto for the last 7 years. That's why I love being at Coinbase. At Coinbase, our goal is to advance economic freedom in the world. And what that fundamentally means is advance the abilities of individuals to live the best versions of their lives, and to create the things that they want to create, and to own the things that they want to own. And so yeah, I think that's going to be it for me. I didn't want to talk with you for a whole hour. I'd love to open it up to questions and conversation. I know that I've said a lot. And again, I'm going to say this last thing one more time, which is that it's what I started the talk with. Don't look up at this tree and try to pick this leaf of like, that's exactly where I want to end up. It's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly scary. It was very paralyzing for me. And I felt like a fraud and didn't know what the hell I was doing. And so I recommend the path that I took. And the reason I'm recommending it is because I took it and it worked out for me, which is that just follow your interests wherever they may lead. And I promise you, like every major you can think of can earn enormous amounts of money. Like you can get rich in any major, I guarantee it. And so like try not to stress about it that way, like you can have an incredible success. The goal is to do what is really interesting to you, to do what comes naturally to you, and to do it really well. And if you do it really well and you're passionate about what you end up doing, success comes with it. So with that, thank you so much.
Okay, Victor, thanks so much for great insights that you actually delivered to the students and audience. Now, let me start asking, by the way, so those who want to ask questions kind of line up behind the microphone, okay? I encourage you again to all the students to ask very interesting and intelligent questions to Victor, so be prepared, okay? So let me start with my question, okay? So all those 3 characteristics or why we need the cryptocurrency, so my question to you is that should I invest some of my money to the crypto and we'll guarantee that I'll be rich in 20, 30 years before I die?
So I'm happy to share what I do, and you can do what you like. But for me, I just buy a little bit of crypto on Coinbase every day. So they have a thing called, it's called dollar cost average, but essentially like you just put in a thing and it buys like, I don't know, $10 of ETH or $100 of ETH, like whatever you want to do, or Bitcoin or any other thing. And you just set it and forget it. And so that's what I did for myself. And it's, and it's nice because it's like, as the price goes up and the price goes down, you just kind of like do it all the way through. In terms of other folks, I think that there's, now that the ETFs have gone live, the Bitcoin ETFs, there's an immense amount of conversation around what proportion of an investor's portfolio should be dedicated to an asset class like crypto, which has been the best performing asset class for the last 15 years. People typically say like in the 2 to 5% range. I don't have strong opinions. I'm 100% in crypto, so. But I would encourage you to read some of the literature from like BlackRock and Fidelity and a lot of these folks that have recently launched their ETFs and see what they say.
Okay. So I'm ready to, you said $20 a day, that will do? Okay. So we'll start investing some money. Any questions from audience students, please?
Yeah,
okay.
please.
Yeah. Go to the microphone, we're recording the whole session, so please.
Yeah, as you had mentioned, like with the SEC approving the spot ETFs, was it early last month? And then I think Bitcoin also just topped out at $1 trillion market value for first time in 3 years? but the SEC still says it won't totally endorse Bitcoin and tells its users and investors to exercise caution. What do you see needing to happen for government entities like the SEC to encourage the use of it or endorse it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll say one thing. So Coinbase is currently engaged in lawsuits with the SEC. So we feel very strongly about our positions there, which I can't comment on or don't have any opinions. But what I will say is that in many of the instances where the SEC has tried to exert its will, the courts have actually said that what they were doing was arbitrary and capricious. And so the SEC is welcome to continue their perspectives, but I look forward to the courts continuing to put guardrails around how they express their perspectives and the impact that they have.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
Hi, Victor. I have a question. I want to know basically a lot of cryptocurrencies, right, are based on supply and demand, and there are a lot of times when people, rightly so, have a fear and they pull out and the market goes down. Do you see a point in time, I guess in the next 10 years, where it kind of stables out and flattens?
Yeah, for sure. So the term that we use in the industry for this is Supercycle. And it's become a little bit of a meme, a little bit of a joke at this point. Because people say it ironically. But really what you want is, you don't want boom and bust cycles, right? Like that is a bad thing. What causes a boom and bust cycle is that if people's expectations get too high and the reality isn't at a commensurate level, then of course at some point it's gonna be like, hey, this is like way overinflated, and then you drop. Like this is just boom and bust cycles in every industry. Like that's just what it looks like. And so in crypto, because the potential is so large, people get very excited about it. And so the goal of our industry, and like what we have to get to, is a place where like everyday people's lives are being improved by the products that we have and the services that we offer. And what you want is you want to take, not that you want to remove, like speculation is normal. Speculation is just a part of life. But what you want is you want for the utility to continue increasing slowly but surely. One of the things people are excited about right now that I'm particularly keen on is stablecoins. And so essentially, if you're looking at everything from remittances to payments to investments to whatever, stablecoins are just objectively better than any form of traditional rails, like like a million times better. It's not even close. And so then the question becomes like, okay, how do you get enough people to use it and adopt it? And one of the things that's quite interesting is that in America, like a lot of people here have bank accounts. Bank accounts have really not changed over the last 30 years. Like they are exactly the same as they've been for a long time. And so for us, like we're kind of used to it, and so it's not a big deal. Like you just make do, right? But one of the fastest growing areas for stablecoin adoption is actually in places like Africa. And so there's a company there called Yellow Card. It's a guy from like Louisiana. He just like wanted to go to Africa and just like build stuff, and so he did. Wild dude. But he said that 90% of the population that onboards onto crypto does it specifically for stablecoins. Why? Because like they want a place to put their money, like they're earning something, but then the inflation rate is 100%. So like, wouldn't you rather have it be in dollars, right? They want to be able to pay people. They want to be able to do remittances. And so you have like enormous growth where like hundreds of millions of people are using this stuff, but in America it's like not as visible, right? Because we're not interacting with those people. And so sometimes it's hard to see like the global phenomenon taking shape. But over time, it's going to continue to pick up steam. And one of the encouraging things is that even through the bear market, like as prices fall and like people get really sad, what we've seen is that crypto adoption has continued to increase in most of the world through the bear market. And like you don't really have that unless it's utility driven, which is what we're aiming for.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. But the spicier the question, the better.
Hi, thank you for your time. Pardon me. Nothing spicier than dropping the microphone on the ground. I have a question. So how do you go about picking which cryptocurrencies to dollar cost average in when you can't really apply like sort of traditional value investing analysis to these currencies? They're not really publishing financial statements or 10Ks and things like that.
Yeah, so one nice thing is that you actually can apply most traditional financial modeling tools to crypto. And if you look at something like Bitcoin or Ethereum as one example, they have a thing called transaction fees, right? Like as people are doing stuff, they're paying the network for its usage. And so you can actually net out and this is all public, like all this information is available, like widely available, it's all open source. And so you can actually see like, okay, how much inflation is there on the network, right? How much are people paying in order to transact on the network? And like, what does it mean based on the market cap and based on these other characteristics for the value of this network versus something like Bitcoin, right? Where you can apply the same exact analysis. And so you actually can get to like almost, parity. But one of the interesting things is that here, like all the information is open source, and so you can have it in real time, right? Like on a block by block basis. And that actually is quite nice because you're not waiting for like these quarterly things that are really like 4.5 months behind. Like you're getting it in that moment, every moment. So it's quite powerful. Having said that, there's a lot of networks where some might argue that the valuation is higher than it should be given the fee revenue that it generates. And you're like, okay, well, why is it so high? Isn't this a little crazy? And a lot of the time, the answer is yes, it is a little crazy. But a lot of the other times that people have high expectations and they think this thing will do very, very well over time. And so it's hard to say like what the right answer is. But I think one thing that you can say for certain is that as the industry continues to mature, there's going to continue to become a greater and greater focus on applying these financial principles to these chains and to these projects of saying like, hey, if this market cap is $10 billion, but it generates $2 in revenue, that's a little weird. Maybe we should not buy that one. You know what I mean? And so like we're getting there slowly but surely.
So I want one or two other just quick questions. One being, it seems like a couple of years ago, every person sort of in like the crypto space, the VC space out west, couldn't stop talking about Web3 and like the practical applications for crypto. And then 3 years later, obviously, while Coinbase itself is doing well as a marketplace, and people are still investing in cryptos, it seems like the whole Web3 infrastructure just hasn't really been integrated into broader society. It seems like a lot of those people have kind of like the meme on Twitter would be quickly pivoted to AI and whatnot. So do you still feel that Web3 and things like that are kind of like, I guess, the future of finance and whatnot, or broader DeFi, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I know a lot of those VCs, like we're buddies. Like I know, what's going on there. But I think there's an element of groupthink where like every 4 years, everyone gets really hype about crypto. And like crypto is the future, right? And then like crypto goes down and they're like, okay, something else is the future. I think AI is obviously very important. But I've been thinking about, there's a blog post kind of formulating my mind about this, which is that AI is actually the continuation of existing systems. It's a continuation of corporate networks. And when you think about it, right, it's going to be one or two companies that are going to do the thinking for you. They're going to tell you the right answers. They're going to apply their own filters and whatever else that they want in terms of driving you to a specific conclusion about the world. And none of these things will be publicly verifiable or visible to you, right? And I just don't think that's particularly exciting. I think it is very exciting to be like, hey, how do we empower 8 billion people to have ownership and freedom and financial control and being able to like live their lives in which there are no middlemen and people can't interfere with what they're doing. I think that's incredibly powerful. And so that's one part of the answer. The second part of the answer is that like a lot of crypto innovations are still ongoing, but people aren't really talking about them. And so just recently, about 2 weeks ago, GoDaddy, which is like one of the biggest website registrars in the world, they've integrated ENS, the thing that I mentioned earlier, Ethereum name service. And so if I own Victor.eth, right, like GoDaddy now essentially like combine like points that to a website of my choosing. And so you're talking about like, there's hundreds and probably billions of websites at this point, and GoDaddy, runs a lot of them essentially. And now they have ENS integrated directly into their platform. And they enable that for their users. And so there's a lot of like little things like that that people aren't seeing all the time, but that are happening, right? And like PayPal, for example, they have 400 million users. They have something like 35 million merchants. They launched their own dollar stablecoin on Ethereum. And so like that is a wild thing for them to like launch their own stablecoin, and they're going to be integrating it into all of their processes. And when you think about a company like PayPal that does a lot of international stuff, that does currency conversion, that like deals with all the merchant stuff, like their fees are very high, obviously, right? And if all you do is just take out the payment processing that happens through traditional layers, and you just plug in crypto, right? And because they're holding the dollars in bank accounts that are powering the stablecoin, they're earning interest on those. Now all of a sudden you're dropping these costs by a factor of 10, right? Or even more. So like these things are happening. It's just that like people aren't, because it's not in the news cycle, people aren't hearing about it.
And sorry, lastly, real quick, I think this will be of interest to a lot of Baruch students, which is what careers exist within the crypto industry, the exchange industry, for people who maybe have an economics or finance background, but sort of no experience with maybe computer science or cryptography and things very technical like that?
Yeah, I mean, most jobs do not require computer science or cryptography. The way that I would describe it is everything around like business development, everything around partnerships, everything around like product management, everything around like all this stuff is all fair game, right? And one way to think about it, like, and that's actually quite nice about crypto, is if you look at the traditional financial industry, it's very credentialism heavy, right? It's like, which school did you go to? Which major do you have? Like, which other previous work experiences you have? Da, 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 da. Crypto does not care about any of that stuff. Most companies in crypto, the way that they recruit is they look at what have you done to contribute to the ecosystem, right? And so for me, what I was doing before I got into crypto, I was writing blog posts, right? I literally was like, hey, this thing happened. Like, let me write about it. Let me talk about it. Hey, this other thing happened. Let me write my thoughts there. And it's like, did I have the most stunning thoughts, like PhD thoughts? Like, no, absolutely not, right? But it really resonated with people that I was doing this stuff because it showed that I was like deeply passionate and curious about what was happening. And I'll give you like a really specific example about how blog posts help you get a job. So at Bison Trails, when I was interviewing there, a couple of months before that, I wrote this blog post. There was this protocol called LivePeer, and they did their token distribution. And this one VC kind of commented about, and he's now an LP in my fund, funnily enough, but he kind of commented about how, oh, this was like the most fair distribution ever. It's amazing. Da, 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 da. And I looked at the data, and I was just like, that's bullshit. This is not that fair, right? And so I wrote an article just basically being like, hey, like they did their best. They tried, but it wasn't that amazing, right? And I kind of pointed to a couple of addresses on the blockchain saying like, hey, these guys got most of the tokens. And so a couple of months later, I'm interviewing at Bison Trails, and again during that second interview, it came up that they had actually read my blog post on that subject because it was about them. They were the guys that were doing that thing, and they like read my thing. They're like, wait a minute, he's absolutely right. And so like it connected the dots for them that they were interviewing me, and they had already liked my work, and they was like, oh, easy, right? And so you have a lot of interesting things like that. And so for everybody, it's like all the crypto cares about is how you contribute to the ecosystem. You can contribute in whatever way you want. If you want to organize events, you want to write blog posts, you want to like research stuff and talk about it, you want to write tweet threads, you want to like do whatever, everything is available to you. You just have to take your skill set and go and like just start trying to do stuff. And at first you'll suck, but then over time you'll get better.
Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Of course.
Okay, thank you for the great questions. The students, anybody? Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
please.
go ahead. Yeah.
One of the things I was curious about is that, sorry, this is not working. One of the things I was curious about is that you said as like a hedge against inflation, you would recommend investing in different types of cryptocurrency, but like with the extreme states of like volatility, especially with like I guess all of them, but like Ethereum and how would that be hedging against like traditional like U.S. inflation?
Sure. I think it's a very fair question. And the honest answer is that it is currently not a hedge, right? But the question becomes like, how are people thinking about it? Where if you make the assumption, right, and you just project out some of the things that have been happening and you're like, hey, will these things continue to be true over time? One of the things is, you know, Bitcoin has continued to grow over the last 15 years, right? It continues to gain adoption, continues to gain a market share. People don't really realize that it's almost at the all-time highs from 2021, like it's right there. And so the expectation is that it's going to pass those all-time highs soon and keep growing. And so if Bitcoin continues to trend upwards and it continues to grow past its $1 trillion valuation, hits 10 trillion, what is expected? What was expected is the same thing that happens with every other asset class, is that its volatility is going to decrease over time. And the closer that we get to having that value that's derived from utility, that people like, you know, actually use this thing and value this thing, and like it's not just, you know, random pumps and random dumps and whatever. If you think those things will be true and you think Bitcoin will keep growing, then it's like, okay, what happens when it hits 10 trillion? What happens when it hits 50 trillion or 100 trillion or like whatever that number is? And then the answer that you kind of get to is that, well, over time, the volatility will continue to decrease. It'll become a better store of value, a better unit of account, and then it'll be like a more obvious hedge for inflation. But again, like if you were to argue against that, well, you would say, well, what if the trend's like, you know, which trend is going to break, right? Like why would this not be true? And I think some of the things that I found is that it's been hard for me to argue against these trends continuing because they've been continuing for the last 15 years. And so something like really dramatic would have to change in order for that to not be the case.
So you're saying like not right now, it'd be like any sort of hedge against inflation. It would just be for a long term if it eventually stabilized.
Well, I think it is a hedge against inflation already, but I think that the volatility from it makes it a very bad hedge against inflation, right? The only way that it's a good hedge against inflation is if you can weather the volatility, right? And so I've been investing in Bitcoin and other crypto assets since 2017, and the first Bitcoin that I bought, not full portion of a Bitcoin, was something like $4,000, and then I bought some at 20,000, and then it fell down to 3,000 or whatever the hell it was, and I felt so bad about the 20,000. I was like, oh goddamn, I'm so stupid. But then over time, like if you could just weather that volatility, right? Bitcoin hit 62,000, and then it went down to 17,000 or whatever the hell it went down to, and now it's back up. And so over time, hopefully, the volatility will decrease, and then you don't have to think about like weathering it anymore.
Right. I was just wondering in terms of like actual like U.S. governments, like what do you think about like the proposal, for example, of like a treasury stablecoin and some type of like more like centralized like form of regulating like U.S. currency?
I think that we definitely want regulation for stablecoins, right? Like that is a sure thing to me, because right now, the way the stablecoin is generated is that like let's say you come to Coinbase and Circle and you're like, hey, I have $1, I would like $1 on the blockchain. You give it to them, they put it in a bank account, and from that bank account they could buy treasuries, they could buy like certain debt instruments and whatever, but they're like trying to generate yield on that stablecoin, on the dollars that are in the bank account. But right now there's not clear laws around like who can do this, what they can invest in, like how quickly they have to disburse funds if somebody asks for it, right? So it'd be really nice if we had clear laws around that, so that JP Morgan can have a stablecoin, like all these other entities can have stablecoins that they feel really good about. But then going to the other question, which is like CBDCs, right? Like central bank issued digital currencies. I'm of the opinion, and this is just my personal opinion, that CBDCs are evil, and they will always be evil, and they cannot be any other way. Because at the end of the day, I think it's quite nice for people to be able to control their own money and have power over their financial lives. And I think that it becomes very problematic where, like, if you have a government that issues this thing and can take your assets at any point in time, and it's incredibly difficult to go after the government for anything, like at least if JP Morgan does it, right, you can try suing them, right? That's within the realm of reason. Trying to sue the government is extremely, extremely difficult. And so, like, I think that there's another thing is that, like, if you don't like JP Morgan, you can switch, right? Go to Bank of America, go to Coinbase, go to whatever. With the US government, there is no switching, like you're locked in. And so I think no matter how a CBDC is designed, like it's over time going to be something that is going to have greater and greater restrictions on its use and greater control over the citizenry that uses it.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
China also seems like they've had a fun time with their like regulation of all their.
Yeah, I mean, like it's wild because they can be like, hey, here's money, but you can only spend it on these 3 things and only in the next 2 hours. Like,
yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Professor Tenzil.
I don't want to take the position of a student if there is a student who wants to ask.
No, it's okay. We're all students, please.
Well, thank you very much for this interesting and stimulating conversation. I have this curiosity. I heard that you work for Coinbase. Am I right?
Yes.
So there is the crypto land, the wonderful paradise where there is decentralization, DAOs, decentralized identity, no censor, etc. And Coinbase actually is a centralized organization, and it's a gatekeeper to this paradise. Would this create any problems or anomalies? That's my first question. And the second question, what is your take when the crypto world will be the mainstream? You know, the Fed now is maybe operational or about to operate and will be able to transfer funds instantaneously, and there are equivalents in Europe as well. So the financial infrastructure is evolving quite fast. So also the previous speaker, as you talked, there is a value proposition, and the value proposition of the crypto world is pretty straightforward. But in the long run, would it really materialize? And the crypto world will be a significant component of the mainstream. I'd like to hear your take.
Yeah. Great questions. So probably spiciest question of, is Coinbase good? But the way that I would put it is that when you look at a place like Coinbase, I think that there's two design considerations that you want to have when it comes to working with the crypto ecosystem or working with decentralized technology. And I think one of them is that, like, fundamentally you need to be able to onboard people, right? Like, people have dollars in JP Morgan or wherever, they'd like to buy crypto. You need some avenue for them to, like, bring those dollars over, purchase the crypto, act as that exchange, and then enable them to continue on their journey in the crypto decentralized ecosystem. And so I think the first thing is that, like, you need an entity like Coinbase to actually enable that onboarding. But the second thing is, like, past that onboarding, you can just stop there. But it's important to not stop there, right? What's really important is that you then have to design products for the open, decentralized ecosystem. And so, for example, Coinbase has Coinbase Wallet as an example that allows you to have non-custodial funds that Coinbase doesn't have access to. It's an app on your phone and on your computer. And so you can control your own funds there. You can interact with DeFi. You can do whatever you want. And Coinbase has no ability to censor you or stop you or whatever it is. And it's important to continue shipping products like that. But the second part is that as you're shipping products, it's important, like, you can ship products in a closed way, or you can ship products in an open way. And I'll give you an example. So Binance has a thing called Binance Smart Chain. I think it's called BNB Chain now. And it's a relatively small set of validators, and it's, like, highly interwoven with their exchange, and everybody kind of thinks about them together. And there's a lot of other exchanges that have launched their own blockchains, right? Such as crypto.org and so on. The way that Coinbase launched our own L2 is that we didn't launch our own blockchain with our own token, right? We launched a layer 2 on Ethereum. It doesn't have its own token. It's using open source technology that is part of an ecosystem, and we're contributing back more technology to that ecosystem. And so, like, we're helping that ecosystem grow. And, like, that is an important way of looking at how do you enable decentralized protocols and decentralized growth and self-custody and all that stuff. Not only building products for that ecosystem, but building products in a way that furthers and advances that ecosystem rather than trying to create your own kind of proprietary gardens. And so I think Coinbase has done the best job of anyone, which is not to say that it's perfect, but, like, we've really tried our best to do a good job there. The other question was around, Main Street. Like when is it going to be a thing? I think that's a great question. Maybe like in 2017, 2018, I was thinking about crypto, and I was like, I'm probably going to be working here, at least 25 years, but probably the rest of my life. And 25 years seemed like a really long time, and now that I'm 7 years into it, I'm like, what the hell happened? The way that I put it is that crypto is the only technology in the world today that fundamentally tries to shift the balance of power from large entities to small entities, right? To take these networks and to take power away from the center and move it out to the edges. There's no other technology in the world today that is trying to do this. And when you're talking about a seismic shift of those proportions of, like, really empowering individuals, that is a thing that goes against so many grains and is going to take a long time, but it's an incredibly vital goal to reach because of our fundamental belief in the power and the sovereignty of individuals, and how important it is that people are really empowered to live their lives to the best of their ability. So it'll probably be a long time. And even, the other comment you said around, like, FedNow and, like, that making, I'm pretty sure it's live already, but I could be wrong. I think maybe you're right. And that making, like, transfers instantaneous. I think it's too little too late, honestly. I think banks will adopt it for sure, but, like, banks are still a ways away from adopting crypto rails, and that's totally okay. But when you talk about a key aspect that's missing, what's missing is programmability. In that when you have money flowing on a blockchain, you can essentially create applications for it. You can program it to do certain things. And so you can say, hey, I'm a merchant. I have received this $100 for this thing that I sold, this widget. $70 of those dollars I need to pay to the supplier, right? Like $20 of those dollars I need to pay in taxes. $10 is my revenue, right? Of that 10, and so like those payments go out automatically into different accounts, right? The $10 that I have received, I want to put like 1% of it towards this giving pledge, and then I want to put 8% of it here and 1% over here, right? And it just does all of it automatically. And like having that programmability, one of the things it does is it cuts down on the amount of like reconciliation, ops, headcount, like everything you need to do around the existing financial system and making sure that it's operating correctly. Because here, everything's in code, it is all publicly verifiable, and you can just see that it's behaving the way that it's supposed to be. And if it doesn't, you can immediately see how it is behaving. And so it's really quite nice. So, FedNow I think is great that it exists and people will use it, but I think everything will move to crypto rails.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Let me ask you one.
Was there one more
no,
over
go
there?
ahead.
Yeah, please.
Dean Jessica Lang from the Weissman School. Okay.
Oh, this is going to be a spicy one, I can tell.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I thought it was wonderful. I am not a crypto investor, but I love reading stories about crypto. And in the past 15 months, the most prominent story was about Sam Bankman-Fried, Carolyn Ellison, and largely about how the crypto world was really shaken by mismanagement. So I wonder, just because I'm a conservative investor, I wonder if you could share the risks. Like you've talked a lot about opportunities and flexibility and the creative process tied to crypto investing and your own experience with that. But can you also talk about the downside?
Yeah, absolutely. And for what it's worth, I'm not advocating for people to go put all their money into crypto. So to be clear, I advocate for everybody to follow their interests. But I think on the FTX side, I think it's a great question. And during that time, there was actually just a lot of turbulence generally. But if you look at what happened with FTX, the defining characteristic of it is that it was a centralized company that was committing fraud. Just straight up. They were just stealing money, right? And that is, it happened that they're working in crypto. They could have been working in real estate. They could have been working in equities. They could have been working in anywhere, right? And fraud is not something that you can really get away with. But one of the things that was interesting is that people were paying attention to their wallets. And one of the things that people realized that is like, hey, there's like something suspicious going on here, is that they claim to have all these funds, but when people looked at the funds that are actually in their publicly known wallets, they were saying like it's not matching up. They're saying they have all this money, but like there's not a lot of money there. And so when you talk about how do you expose frauds, actually crypto is incredibly difficult to be fraudulent in because so much of the information is public. And so here, we had this centralized fraud that can happen anywhere, and it's really unfortunate it did happen. But it's also really important to talk about what happened to other financial institutions that were crypto native. And so, for example, you have on-chain applications such as like on-chain banks that essentially enable you to like borrow and loan assets. They have on-chain exchanges essentially such as Uniswap that allow you to trade assets against each other. And one of the things you had like collateralized positions, meaning that like I put $100 of Ethereum, of ETH in, I borrow $50 of USDC, dollars. There's some ratio there, and like I have to maintain that collateral, otherwise I get liquidated, right? It's an over-collateralized loan. And one of the things that we saw that was actually really interesting is that across DeFi, decentralized finance, dApps on blockchains, there was no mass bailout event. There was no mass leverage event. Because everything is public and open source and all the data is available on chain, everybody can see the health of each loan. They can see the health of the overall portfolio. They can see what price would have to increase or decrease in order for this thing to be liquidated. And so all of the actual financial companies, applications that are on chain, all of them weathered this storm successfully, right? None of them had any kind of like fraud or any of that stuff. And I think it's really important, and why I think it's important to continue pushing for more things to be on chain, to have that public visibility. When it comes to risks, and again, like I'm not advocating people go and start investing in crypto. I was happy to share what I do, but I'm not saying anybody else needs to do that. But there's a lot of risks. It's an enormous amount of risk. I think volatility is a huge risk, obviously. One of the other risks is that a lot of these protocols or tokens, they're essentially startups, right? They're very young, they're very immature. A lot of them will fail, right? As most startups do. And so, it's kind of like imagine that you were on Robinhood and you saw this this company and you have no idea what it is, and you're like, let me go buy that. And everybody would be like, well, that's a pretty dumb thing to do. Well, you should not do that with crypto, right? Or any other thing that you could potentially invest into. And so if anybody's thinking about getting involved, my advice is always going to be, if crypto is interesting to you, go contribute to the ecosystem. Go publish something, go organize something, go market something, go like actually add value to the ecosystem. If somebody's interested in like buying crypto or trading crypto, my advice is always going to be like take a very conservative approach. Don't put in more than you can afford to lose. The pathway that I took with my mom is I said like, hey, put whatever amount of money you want to put and like buy it and then just like don't touch it. And so the hardest part for her has been like, don't touch it. And so, she bought it in the last bull market when prices were up and then prices were down and she's like, what happened to my money? I was like, I'm telling you, I've done this, just don't touch it. And, prices kind of rose back up and now she's okay. And so you just really want to take a conservative approach there. You don't want to buy anything that you're not familiar with. If you are going to buy something, just leave it alone in the same way that if you were to buy like equities, most of the time it's like don't day trade, just leave it alone for a while. And yeah, just be like super kind of like risk conscious because it is a very high risk industry in many regards. Does that answer it?
Okay, so I commit myself to put aside $20 every day, and I'll see you 10 years later whether your advice was actually on the mark. Okay, let me just ask one more question, as somewhat lighter question to conclude our speaker series here. And Victor and I had a conversation when he visited the Weissman Center. So I said, oftentimes I advise students to follow his or her own passion, okay, when they don't know exactly what they want to do. And Victor immediately challenged me and said, no, I don't like that word, the passion, okay? So now in the public forum, I challenge you that why you say that, why you don't like the passion. I think you use a lot of interest part rather than the passion. So can you just elaborate why you just object to my statement that follow your passion?
I think most people don't have passion.
Okay.
No, just straight up. When I was sitting in your seats, was I like passionate about finance or economics or psychology? Like if you ask me like, what are you passionate about? I wasn't going to list any of those things. I wasn't going to list any job title. I did have friends that were indeed really passionate. Like there's this guy, Alex Shukin, who started IMG, like the investment club. He went out into iBanking for 2 years. He went into a PE shop. Now he's like one of the top guys at like the PE firm that he's at. Incredibly successful. Always knew he wanted to go down that route, right? Like in high school, I went to high school with him. He always this is the route. I want to take it. I can't wait, right? And I stood next to him and I was like, well, I feel like a fraud because I don't have that passion, but like all the smart people are doing it. And most of my friends didn't have any passion either. A lot of them still don't. Which is, and I think it's such a high bar to put. It's such a high bar. And so if you have a passion, congratulations, that is incredible. Please chase it. Like it's the only thing that matters, just go down that route, right? But for most of you that don't have a passion, just know that it's totally okay, and I didn't either, and most people don't. Like the vast majority of people don't have a passion, and that's totally fine. And so don't try to put this like super high bar on yourself. Put like a lower bar, which is like just pick a branch, which is go down like whatever path is interesting to you. Not interesting forever, just interesting to you right now, right? And I'll tell you a funny story. There was so after I got after EY, I worked at another startup. I got laid off from that startup because they didn't have any money. And I was thinking like, what should I do? Should I stay in crypto? One of the things I was actually really interested in, I wanted to go work at Tesla. I think Tesla's amazing. And I was like, well, Tesla doesn't have any jobs for me. I should go get a dual degree of like an MBA and a Master of Science in environmental science, such as sustainability, right, green energy type stuff. And so I started to look at schools, and I went to like Harvard, I went to MIT, I went to Stanford, and like I was going to go to Ross in Michigan as well. And so, because I was just like, I don't know if there's really any opportunity in crypto. Everything was so sad, and so I was like, all right, let me just keep going down a different path that interests me. And it just so happened that I organized a conference, like a really big one, and then through that, it got connected to Bison Trails, and then like kept going down that interesting path. And there was a job that that we created for me. And so like even when the going gets really tough, even when you're broke and sad, and nobody has any jobs or opportunities, it's important to kind of keep going down the interest path and not try to set a passion bar for yourself.
Okay,
I think.
I think the lesson is here that follow your interesting things, right? And then resilience. I think stick around, right? Just go through is probably the message. So, okay, let me give you a few minutes back to you. And again, as a token of appreciation, we got a a little small gift. And so, looks nice, right? So, oops, let me just show you. Oh, may not be able to.
The box is great. I'll just take the box.
Nothing in it, right? So, okay. Thanks so much, Victor.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was a great talk. Okay?
Thank you.
Give us big applause. Okay. Oh, he got it. So, and then I think his little extra battery charger, right? You have to charge it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Victor. Okay. Well, I want the students kind of stick around and line up to say hi to Victor and just to have an opportunity to network, okay? So thanks so much. Okay, have a great day.